Imagine being forced from your home, your land, your ancestors' graves, so that others can profit. This is not just a story of the past. This is the Trail of Tears, a brutal chapter in the history of U.S. capitalism and white supremacy. In the early 1800s, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, Muskogee, and Seminole nations thrived in the southeastern United States. They built schools, wrote constitutions, and even adopted European farming and business practices. White settlers and the U.S. government called them the Five Civilized Tribes, not out of respect or love, but because these nations had adopted many aspects of European American culture that settlers valued. In reality, this label was used to justify why these tribes were worthy of negotiation, even as settlers had already wiped out or displaced countless other native nations who resisted assimilation. But in a society built on white supremacy and capitalist greed, none of this mattered. The land was too valuable. The gold beneath it is too tempting. As Karl Marx wrote in Capital, accumulation of wealth at one pole is, therefore, at the same time accumulation of misery at the opposite pole. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson, himself a wealthy slave owner and land speculator, signed the Indian Removal Act. This law was not about civilizing or protecting native people. It was about opening up millions of acres for white settlers, cotton plantations, and capitalist expansion. When gold was discovered on Cherokee land, the pressure to remove native people became unstoppable. Treaties were broken, promises ignored, and the law was twisted to serve profit. Jackson's attitude was openly violent and supremacist. He once wrote, "I have on all occasions preserved the scalps of my enemies, and this will be the case with the Creeks. I prefer bleeding them to give them some sense." The Cherokee Nation resisted, not with violence, but with the law. They won in the Supreme Court, Worcester versus Georgia, 1832, but Jackson and the U.S. government ignored the ruling. White supremacy meant that even the highest law in the land could be set aside for profit. Some tribes, like the Seminole, fought back with armed resistance. The Second Seminole War became the longest and costliest Indian war in U.S. history. As Frantz Fanon wrote in The Wretched of the Earth, colonialism is not satisfied merely with holding a people in its grip and emptying the native's brain of all form and content. By a kind of perverted logic, it turns to the past of the oppressed people and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. Between 1830 and 1850, the U.S. government forcibly removed more than 60,000 Native Americans from their ancestral lands in the southeast to what was then called Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. The most infamous of these forced migrations was the Cherokee Trail of Tears, which took place from 1838 to 1839. About 16,000 Cherokees were rounded up at gunpoint by federal troops and state militias. Families were torn from their homes with little warning, given barely any time to gather belongings, and forced to march over 1,000 miles, much of it on foot, through harsh winter conditions with inadequate food, clothing, or shelter. Disease, starvation, and exposure were rampant along the way, and at least 4,000 Cherokee men, women, and children died before reaching their destination. Even some of the soldiers who carried out the removal were horrified by what they witnessed. John G. Burnett, a U.S. Army private who participated in the migration, later wrote, "I fought through the Civil War and have seen men shot to pieces and slaughtered by thousands, but the Cherokee removal was the cruelest work I ever knew." The tragedy was not limited to the Cherokee. The Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations also endured deadly removals, with thousands more lives lost. The lands these nations were forced to leave behind became some of the most valuable farmland in the American South, quickly seized and cultivated by white settlers. Much of this land was worked by enslaved Africans, generating enormous wealth for white plantation owners and northern banks, while the original inhabitants suffered loss, trauma, and the destruction of their way of life. As Angela Davis reminds us, racism is intricately linked with capitalism. The two are historically intertwined. The five tribes rebuilt in Oklahoma, but the trauma and injustice of their forced removal have never faded. Generations later, the pain of lost homelands, broken treaties, and shattered families still echoes in their communities. Yet their story is not just one of loss. It is also a testament to survival, resilience, and resistance in the face of a system designed to erase their existence. Despite unimaginable hardship, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole nations established new governments, schools, and cultural traditions in Indian Territory. They preserved their languages, rebuilt their societies, and continued to fight for their rights and recognition. The phrase, "Trail of Tears," itself was born from the words of a Choctaw leader, who, after his people's removal in 1831, described the journey as a trail of tears and death. This haunting description soon came to symbolize the suffering of all the tribes forced westward. The Trail of Tears is a lesson written in blood and sorrow. When profit and white supremacy rule, justice is trampled and humanity is betrayed. But the resistance of the Cherokee, Seminole, and all Native nations is a powerful reminder that the fight for dignity, land, and self-determination never truly ends. Their survival is an act of defiance, and a call to remember, to honor, and to continue the struggle for justice. The Trail of Tears is not just history, it's a warning. Capitalism and white supremacy will always find new ways to justify theft and violence unless we resist. As Che Guevara, an Argentine Marxist and a major figure of the Cuban Revolution said, "The true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love." It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality. Remember the names: Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, Seminole. Remember their strength, their loss, and their survival. And remember, the struggle for justice continues. Organize, resist, be unbreakable.